Good afternoon, everyone. My name is TeacherOla, and welcome to Learning with the TeacherOla's platform. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about the history of the English language in 10 minutes. Now, several times we've come to wonder, does the English language actually have a history? What are the events? What are the occasions? What are the levels of development that is ascribed to the development and the history of the English language? So today we are going to be looking at the English language, when it began, how it grew to become what it is now. But it is worthy to note that the English language which we speak today, the English language which many of us are conversant with today, is actually not the English language that was used in the past. So today we're going to be looking at the timeline and the events that surrounded the development of the English language. Now, the English language is indigenously, originally, and naturally the language of the Britons. Now, Britain is the owner, the original owner of the English language. Now, because the English language is spoken in several countries, in several places far and near, several things has resulted to that: commercial activities, international diplomacy, colonization, and several other things, technology, growth, development. But the English language which we know actually started in the 5th century with the invasion of the German people. And the West Germanic invaders, they invaded Britain in the 5th century and settled there up till 7th century. Now, the invaders who came actually from the places we know today as Netherlands, Scotland, and the lands, of course, these people, they came in 3 tribes. Now, when they entered into Britain, they were actually of 3 tribes. Now, these 3 tribes are the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. Now, the Angles is the major dialect, the major dialect that was spoken by these West Germanic invaders that translated and revolved to the English language that we speak today. So out of these 3 dialects, the English language became prominently used, probably because the Germanic West invaders, the Angles were actually of more population than the other tribes. So this language continued to be used until when the German people had to vacate because another group of invaders invaded Britain. Now, this group of invaders was led by William the Conqueror between the 8th to the 9th century. Now, for over that century, William the Conqueror led his people to settle, and this actually influenced the development of the English language. But one other very important thing to note is that after William the Conqueror settled, then we had the Scandinavians, whom we also call today the Vikings. Now, the Scandinavian people, warriors, ruthless people, whom the way of life as of then was just to settle to what we have as the modern colonization of today. Now, the Scandinavians, they are ruthless people. They came and they settled in Britain because they were scouting the entire England. They were scouting the entire the Mediterranean Sea. They traveled far and wide. They invaded, they seized land, they seized properties. So when they came into Britain, this also affected them. But they met the language of the Angles, so they had to live side by side with the language. Then now what we have today is what came after them, of course, were the Normans. The Normans came and settled in Britain also. They invaded Britain also around the 11th to 15th century. Now, this group of people, they were speaking the type of French called the Norman French. And if you were following with this story, you would actually know that before they came, the people of Britain, they were speaking the English, this English that are taking different form, different styles. They had to borrow some words from countries, and the Scandinavians that came, there was a lot of influence on the English language. But when the Norman people came, their own language was very, very much different. They spoke a particular type of French, like I said before, called the Norman French. Now, the Norman French had to live side by side with the English language. There was no way, in fact, it was almost impossible for the English language to not just be used anymore. So now, as at then, the French language, because the Norman people came to settle in Britain, now became the language of the high class people, while the English language was being used by the low class. So the rich people, the politicians, the learned, the scholars, as at then, they had to converse in the French language, but the English language was still being used, but it was being used by the lower class of people, the laborers, the manual workers, and so on and so forth. So from there, when the language had to live side by side, the English language mixed up one way or the other with the French language, because it's not possible to have two languages being spoken in one geographical location and there won't be some borrowing, some loan words. So this was what happened. The English language had to borrow some words, had to borrow some loan words. It's surprising to know that words like window, take, leg, sky, government, church, these words are actually Norman French words, which was borrowed into the English language from the Norman people. Then from there, they had to grow into the English language proper, which is the early modern English. Now, the early modern English is the 15th century. This was as at when the Renaissance era came up. Now, the idea of the Renaissance was that people were becoming conscious of humanity. They became conscious that humanity is actually a vital aspect of life. So poets, writers, as at then, they began to use this idea, this ideology behind everything that they did. So the Renaissance era also saw a great increase, a great development in technology. It saw a great development in science across the world. So new words were brought into the English language, like new words that were developing as a result of new things that were being developed came into the English language as at then. Now, it is also worthy to note that it was around this period that printing was actually made known. Now, because people were writing very much as at now, they had to print their work, they had to publish their work so that people from far and near could read it. So when they read it, of course, they were the language of the print press as at then was the English language. So this made the English language to grow. It went far and near. Actually, William Caxton did a very good job by introducing this printing business, which of course made the English language to go far and near. Then we have, of course, the modern English. And the modern English, which this period around the 17th century was when colonization became a major world activity. Like the France, Britain, and other world powers came together to sit down and began to colonize major parts of the world. India, major parts of Africa, even the United States was even colonized by Britain. So this saw a spread of the English language. They took their language and their culture out there for people to be colonized with. Now, the English language that we speak today is what we call the late modern English. The language being used by poets, the language being used by writers and authors today is the late English language, which also transited from